Think trauma is just a bad memory? Nah, it's a full body experience. Tense jaw, constantly on edge, digestive system doing acrobats for no reason. That's not random. That's survival mode stuck in overdrive.
In this episode, we're taking a closer look at how trauma lives in the body and what real healing actually looks like. Spoiler, it's not talk therapy and inside alone. It's regulation, boundaries, and coming back home to yourself. I'm Lisa.
And I'm Stephanie. And we're wildly unbothered.
So I can't tell you how many times I've sat across the room, the screen, whatever, from a client and having the conversation around what they have experienced and the trauma that has gone on in their lives. And that they tell me things like, I know that that car accident isn't still happening. I know that that person still doesn't have access to me. I know there's not any threat anymore, but... And I do this because that like the but is so much the key. The but is like where we go from our prefrontal cortex, analytical thinking, knowing to the but, to like our subcortical brain, where all of this is held, where we have feelings and emotions and this like sense of things. Our subcortical brain doesn't have vocabulary. Subcortical brain has feelings and not verbal.
Yes.
This is where the magic happens, though, because we realize it's how our body is responding to the trauma.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And there's so many different ways that that can happen and that it manifests for different people. And I like to say it's almost its own language. So to be in our body that's trying to speak to us and give us the signs of what's going on, but it's a foreign language until you start to learn it. It's interesting for us to recognize that and be able to show people that connection and correlation. I feel like is very helpful these days because it has been such a disconnected experience.
The disconnection, that's the other piece, is so often in our lives that we walk around like we are just some kind of like dissociated head, like disconnected head, floating head of like the things we think and how we go through life. And we don't realize that our body is so interactive with us and is so holding things. And it's not just this piece of us, it's all of it. So of learning that language, how do we connect these things and really know that what's happening in our brain is happening in our body, and what's happening in our body is happening in our brain, and really learn the integration piece.
Yes. And thank goodness we're finally starting to integrate it. I feel like in even medical practices, it's on the newer side of things, but we have a body, we have a brain. So we have that physical and mental health, and they absolutely are correlated and connect. They hang out, they chat all the time.
So just giving some backstory is I used to be the kind of person who I would go to bed at night. I like to read, and I like to read at night and kind of get myself just all like kind of unwound. I would turn off the light and I could fall asleep like nobody's business. And I would sleep sound through the night until my alarm went off. Wake up feeling rested and restored, carry on through your day. Rinse, repeat, do that next night. Experience trauma and literal overnight, not even a pause, literal overnight. I went to this disjointed 2 to 3 hours, insomnia, difficulty sleeping, nightmares, you name it. And having to do my own work to get back to reasonable sleep. Because the reality is we don't go all the way back to here because, that's magic fairy dust. But getting back to a healthy level of sleep and dealing with what I needed to within my own trauma. That was like my first experience thinking around how trauma happens in our bodies.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually a running joke between you and I. If we could get a full night's sleep, we'd take over the world because it really has affected us for so long or has been so influential to our health or how we're functioning in our spaces. Insomnia was something I experienced too. Another thing that was very chronic for me was digestive issues. So still navigating that. And I think what adds layers of difficulty to the clarity of things is that there's so many environmental variables that could also be present. So for me, there's no way I would have been like, oh, my belly hurts. That's from trauma. I'd been like, what am I eating? What else is going on? We are in the trending fad of wellness, which I love and appreciate. But then there's all the changes in what you should be doing or should be eating. So it makes you question. But that chronic aspect, and then seeing how working through trauma and regulating my system impacted those two things, the sleep and the
Mhm.
digestive side directly. And to
Mhm.
see that when I do get stressed, how those are still affected directly, there's that connection to it again. You're like, oh, okay. It may not be wholeheartedly the only influence, but it is 1,000% connected to it.
Mhm.
And makes you want to pay attention more. It's sharing my body needs something. So it's kind of that learn the language, that reminder of, hey, girl, what's going on? Like, what do you need?
How
And
you
that
taking care of
muscle memory.
yourself?
Yes. And thankfully, I feel well equipped. I feel grounded. I'm still going to have experiences. But when that comes up, it's more of what do you need? How do you address it? Where
Mhm.
before it was detrimental. Those things just bleed into your life in such a different way when you don't know what's going on or you don't have that language.
As licensed clinical social workers, our like first place we start is rule out medical. And
Thousand
ruling out
percent.
medical means we go to our general practitioner, we go to those kind of specialists, the physical health doctors, and we try to figure those things out. And sometimes that's exhausting. That's really exhausting because alongside my insomnia also came like some really tense muscle issues to the point where I was being sent for x-rays and all sorts of other things. And yet then to kind of come back to once I started working on the core trauma aspects, the roots, that my tense muscles relieve themselves. So it's interesting how we know and we don't know. Also,
Mm-hmm.
we need to rule out medical because we aren't just all in our heads or all in our bodies. We are a holistic being. And I think
Absolutely.
giving ourselves the context of it is all there and not feeling like one is lesser. Because that's the
Mm-hmm.
other part. I've had people come to me and like, I did all this testing and I'm dealing with all this pain. And the doctor just said it's all in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a tip is it is all in your head because like literally it's our nervous system that has kept us alive and kept us safe and knows how to do these things, but it feels so shaming. It's a dismissive factor, like I can't treat you because you don't show up anything on these tests, like as if it's nothing, and it's like
Exactly.
everything. We've just ruled
Mm-hmm.
out something. And so to like know where your next step is, and yes, we are still at the kind of somewhat forefront of these things, of
Absolutely.
knowing there's some amazing books out there. The Body Keeps a Score, The Deepest Well with ACE studies. Like we have these books that are telling us things to notice. It still lives in us, even
Mm-hmm.
if it's not necessarily something that shows up on some kind of lab report.
Yeah, true. And that tends to be more common than not.
Mhm.
And it's hard. That's where I think that figuring out the language sounds good in theory. It's absolutely possible, but it's not more common because it is brand new of that
Mhm.
connection. If I break my arm, it's very obvious. There is no negating that my bone is broken. But when it comes to nervous system or some of the other regulating aspects or the brain aspects, because it's new, it's not as obvious. Our tests aren't quite there yet, or there's deeper things going on that it isn't measurable in that sense. And that's where the signs, that other language that's coming up, is where we start. That's how we begin to kind of figure out what that looks like, because we don't have the language and sometimes the tests aren't there for it. So thank goodness for things like um, the ACE questionnaire and stuff. We're beginning to see the association of trauma causing things and how it affects health. What might be some of the things that you have noticed consistently with clients that you've seen with trauma and having them experiencing it in their body?
I think that often I will have people come to me and even like giving the kind of the disclaimer at the forefront of the, but I have a really good life.
Mm-hmm.
Really great partner. I love my job. I'm really happy with those things. And then again, they go back to like the but
Exactly.
magic word. Because then,
Yes.
like, that's literally we have to drop into knowing this other language, and it's giving it, like, some kind of credibility of, like, that's valid. It's so valid. And I think that people coming to me that it's so unnerving to have
Mhm.
these things and have no answers. I mean, I
Yes.
wish that there was, like, magic fairy dust. I don't have any magic
Right.
fairy dust. I wish I could do like, like, sprinkle that over people and they'd be, like, healed and done. But the things that like in our bodies like we can deal with, like the things
Mhm.
that we just kind of like put up with, like the tense muscles or clenching your jaw, and we can kind of say, oh, these are just because you're stressed, to like stress less. Thank you very much
Yes.
for that, by the way. uh,
Didn't think of that one.
as is so helpful. Difficulty sleeping, and like
Yeah.
I can't tell you all the tips and tricks and things
You
not
try.
helpful.
Right.
Been there, done that, and please don't tell those to people who deal with insomnia because that's not the thing. It's
Mhm.
of yes, there are some things that are really helpful in mindfulness and process that we can
Mhm.
do for like difficulty sleeping, but generally the going like status quo advice doesn't work.
Right.
Digestive issues definitely, and that there's been some strong correlations back to childhood trauma of how your stomach processes things and the enzymes get basically mixed up. And so,
Mhm.
what's necessary to get things back on track? And it's not just like you need to take an acid, which is
Mhm.
the status quo. Um,
Right.
so, trying to figure out like how do I get those things back healthy? And also, like, yes,
Yeah.
we need to deal with those things as they come, but also to be able to get to some roots. The interesting one, and I think you and I have kind of talked through these things, is dissociation. That
Mhm.
word is misunderstood. It needs to be understood for the fact that dissociation happens when we are getting from here to there. And sometimes we just don't quite remember. We're in a like altered presence. We've all done it where we're driving home and all of a sudden you're like, I'm at the exit or I'm at my turn. How did I even get here? Because your system knows how to get you from here to there. That's a dissociative state. It's different than mental health dissociation, but somewhat the
Right.
same, that we
Yeah.
have these aspects of ourselves that we can feel. And this is very much that language we're talking about of people who have
Mhm.
gone through these significant traumas. You can feel yourself looking in on yourself. You can feel like you're watching it from a different vantage point. You can feel like it's very like robotic. You can feel
Mhm.
like you're floating. There's all sorts of different like ways to describe dissociation. Again, let's go back to the subcortical brain does not have its own vocabulary or verbal like words to like describe. So we're just trying to put words on something that is happening.
Right. And for something like that, that's the brain and body cueing in of we need less. So
Yeah.
being able to tune into what feels more manageable, it's almost like a protective thing. Same with difficulty sleeping. Your brain or body might be like, hey, sleep's not so safe. So you got to be able to like wake up quickly, or there's
Mhm.
other stuff going on with dreaming. So that affects it, or the tension. It's usually, if you have an injury, a lot of times that tenseness happens to protect whatever else is going on or what it's around. So although these don't feel great, how we maybe store the trauma in the body, it's a protective factor. It's our body telling us,
Mhm.
hey, girl, we need something, or like, hey, this doesn't feel comfortable. We're in this defense stance.
Mhm.
But I've experienced a lot of times that the validation of just saying, I completely understand where you're coming from, and that is trauma. Before we open that trauma door of work, before we go into maybe some somatic exercises or things to pay attention to or alternatives that feel better. Sometimes just that initial, I understand where you're coming from and this is why.
Mhm.
Ugh, people are like, thank you. Because, like you're talking about with the rule out or it just being new of the overlap in health or whatever the dynamic, a lot of times there isn't validation, there isn't answers, and it perpetuates the pain or the discomfort or the concern because it's like, okay, well, I know something's wrong and I don't have an answer. So now being able to just say, hey, I got it, I get you, let's figure that out. I think it definitely has such an impact on the process and being able to feel hopeful and more in control of your body, or at least understanding what it needs so you can move into that space.
There's so much in there, you know, of understanding ourselves and feeling validated of why we're having these. And yes, it would be so fantastic if we could go to a doctor and like they, oh, you know what, like you have an infection, here's a medication, and you're good. And also, it's not that simple. But
Right.
then once you know it's not those things, is what else is it? And knowing that you're not stuck. You're not
Mhm.
that like nothing's wrong with you, you're not broken, it's not your
Yeah.
fault. None of these things. This is literally how it's supposed to work.
Yes. But truly, nothing's wrong with you. Your body's been protecting you the only way it knew how. But survival isn't the same as living, and you deserve to do more than just get by.
Healing isn't about getting fixed. It's about finally feeling safe enough to be fully here in your body, in your life, on your terms. Thanks for joining us. See you next time and stay wildly unbothered.